Okay, so we're heading towards this goal of valuing people, creating this culture. We've covered personality science, emotional science, and now we're pivoting towards the last one, which is the future. Da-da-da! Value science. Value science. So there's a whole science around values. Again, I'm presenting these modalities that have been used for years. ACT has a lot to say about values because they talk about pivoting towards values. I'm using logotherapy, which is authored by Viktor Frankl, and the Values in Action Research Institute, which is started by Martin Seligman, one of the founders of positive psychology, to help this get in. So they've done tons of research, and we'll look at some of their research papers about how this affects organizations and outcomes. It's really the future of valuing people. So we're setting a course towards where we are headed as a people. Where are you going? How do you do work? Okay, and this is the contrast. And I don't want to make goals to be the boogeyman because we all need goals. But goals stop. Goals lead to stuff and an outcome, and then it stops. We produce the report, and then it's done. Okay? We execute the sales goals, and it's finished. We hit the budget mark, and it's done. Values leads to people forever. Okay? Values are all about how we treat people. They're always connected to people. When we disassociate a value from people, it's not a value anymore. When valuing people becomes our vision, we will thrive. Okay? You can see how this is starting to create that current towards the future, where we're going towards people and how we do our work. When we intentionally discuss how we do values, we start to create that current that moves people towards those values, not just a goal. You can see how Boeing said, we're going to go that way. And their entire culture started moving that way, and it was a goal of selling X amount of airplanes at any cost. And what was the cost that they did? People's lives, even other people's jobs. $9 billion in losses. Big cost to get to that goal. Well, they got to the goal, but they lost their values in the process. So here are some of the studies from VIA. It increases physicians' well-being when they focus on values. Increases performance and satisfaction of workers when they focus on values. Higher job satisfaction, engagement, and performance when you focus on values. Leads to better performance, according to Harvard Business Journal. Okay, so all of those things are led by values. All of those outcomes come when we create values. So we have these levels of values. This is from Viktor Frankl. Now, this is a chart on your handout. It's very important. So at the bottom, we have creational values. And every organization I consult with, I talk to, they all have creational values that are plastered on the wall somewhere. And this is not a negative thing. But it's like we create widget X with integrity and quality. Okay. You create widget X, that seems like an obvious one. Like if a soccer team were to do this, we put the ball in the goal more often than the other team with alacrity and panache. You know, it's stating the obvious of what they do and how they do it. But really what you want to do is you want to get into the experiential values. And the great organizations say, well, why do we create this object? So that we can create an experience. Okay, so Starbucks creates a great cup of coffee, but they don't tell their employees, we create great coffee at all costs. You know, we don't care if we kill vendors along the way. No, they create a great cup of coffee so that they can create a great experience for their consumers. They want to create what they call the third home. Home away home is the cafe, where you come and enjoy your friends and a great cup of coffee. So it's all about the experience, experiential values. Southwest gets you an experience of getting to your relatives and you enjoy the flight. So, but there's something higher than that. Like, well, why do we do these values? I mean, I've worked at organizations that serve the poor, but also treated their workers poorly. You think, wait a minute, how do they do that? Because they lost the last idea. Why do we serve the poor? Why do we create this third culture? Because we value people. The ultimate value is one thing, valuing people. Valuing people. So let's back up and let's review these things, because They're all important. You need all three levels. Creational values is the standards of excellence for a product or service. It's the right value point to fit the means user and means and utility. So all that's saying is like sometimes there is a value point that's better. You know, like if I were to, I could get an internet service that gives you a little bit of internet and it costs $10, or I can give you the super internet that costs $1,000. And you'd be like, oh, I can't afford the $1,000, so that this one is just right. Even though this one has better qualities, this one fits my means. Okay, so we do that all the time. So you're creating a product or a service that is really defined by excellence and product standards. So you need to do this. So I'm not poo-pooing this at all. Like, you want your doctors to say, what is the standard for excellence for this procedure? The nurses need to know, what is the standard for excellence for this procedure and this service? That's unquestionable. If you don't have that in your organization, you're not being kind or gracious by letting people be sloppy about what is excellent. You know, if you send out a report and it's full of spelling mistakes and errors and you're just like, well, you know, let's just be kind to all my team. No, they didn't produce excellence. We want to produce excellence. Why? Because you're giving it to somebody. You're serving a patient. You're giving them a product. You're giving them a service. This is creational excellence. So you need to have this defined. And it's very important to define. But this is usually where most organizations stop. This is the product service. So what does that give the impression to the employees? This is the highest value point. Creational excellence, period. That creates commodity culture if you stop here. So we need to go higher. Experiential values. And this is where you spend a lot of time focusing on values. So there's two value categories here, energetic values and then calming values. So when you study emotional science, some of our values are creative, they're energetic. I go out with my energy and I create wisdom. You want your doctor staff to be constantly improving and growing in knowledge and wisdom so that they can serve your staff better. Nobility is where you do things excellently. You do things on the behalf of others. You sacrifice and suffer on the behalf of others. You work hard. You go through the night. You do things above and beyond to serve others. That's what nobility does. And not for their own glorification, for the good of others. That's a noble spirit. It's a noble value. Joy. My extroverted employee brings joy to everything that she does. Happiness, fun. You know, so some people are entertainment. That's their whole purpose, is to bring joy to others. That's what Andre Agassi realized. I do this to bring joy. You know, when I was in the Mayo Clinic with my dad getting a heart valve replacement, they produced these calming values for us. They were not only thinking about the patient, they were thinking about the patient's family. We went into a waiting room at the Mayo Clinic. My dad got a heart valve replacement. They had a board, an electronic printout of where my dad was in the surgery, pre-op. They are now doing the incision. He is now under anesthesia. And we would see each step of the way, and there was a phone that would ring periodically and say, he's doing well. He's now at this stage in the waiting room. And I thought, this is unprecedented. They're thinking about how they can calm the family of the patient. They're not only thinking about the patient, they're thinking about how to calm the family of the patient. Wow, that's some values. They created peace and trust with information, and the person who was making the call, it's like, wow, they thought about us. And I'm still telling this story. This happened 20 years ago. I'm still telling the story. You know, but if they didn't have the creational excellence and my dad died, or heaven forbid had some other complication because they didn't do their jobs well, all of that caring would have not felt genuine. So they created a lot of calming values while their surgeons were in there doing all of these energetic values of nobility and wisdom. Okay? So the problem is we usually do not talk about these and define them. Okay? And the other problem is we often define them on the organizational level, but not the individual level. We don't give individuals time to really dissect who they are and what their values are. So look at these values. I think we have them written down there, don't we? look at them and put a star next to these. Which do you create the most with your personality and your life's energy? What is the value that you create the most? My wife creates more calming values than I do. I create more energetic values. Which one is your primary value? And there's actually 5 or 6 different sub-values that go in each one of these categories that most people never contemplate in their life. They never dissect, this is how I do life. You know, part of the reason why I'm here is because I realized I'm high in openness, and this is what I do for life. I bring wisdom. It's what I wanted to do. And so I pursued it. And I try to do this for others. My wife, she's a therapist. She brings peace, like just being in her presence, peace, harmony, trust. And this is the area where you can grow in all of these. Like the personality traits, you can't grow. But in these, I can learn from others. I can see, oh, I see how my wife makes trust. I see how my daughter makes trust. I see how my employee creates energy. I can grow in that. I can grow in my understanding of this. So you need to lead each individual in your team to define not just what the organization creates, but what the team creates and what the individual creates. When you let the individual say, what do you bring to work to each day? What are your highest values? At the end of the day, what do you want people to say about you? Okay? And then there's the ultimate value, what we talked about. It moves towards people. It's not towards a goal, towards people. And here's the problem. You can make your experiential values the end. I've been with nonprofit organizations that mistreated their teams. Why? Because they put one of the experiential values as the end. That creating, feeding the poor was the end. And so what would they do in order to feed the poor? They would run roughshod over their team until they were exhausted and overwhelmed. They would shame their team into working harder and harder because of this righteous cause. You see, you can serve a cause, a value, but if people aren't your highest value. And this is very important on the organizational level. So your organization, your department always has to have this as the highest value, and your team needs to understand that. That we're not doing this to create a good experience for another team. We're doing this for people. It's always for people. People are always the end of every object, of every activity, of everything that you do. It's about people. And if you don't have it about people, if that's not your highest value, you will distort your organization, your department, your team. Okay, so that's an important thing to distinguish. So get in groups of 2 and tell one story about someone who exhibited one of these values. Okay? Wisdom, peace, joy. Because we all know somebody in our life that just embodies this. And this is a very important way to improve this, is constantly be thinking about who embodies these values. Who embodies peace that I know? And I know some people that, like my wife, she brings peace. I know my daughter brings joy. I know a coworker and a friend that brings wisdom. So tell a story to somebody else about how that person embodied one of these values in a special way to you in your lifetime. Just a quick story. You've got about 3 or 4 minutes. Go. All right, bringing it back here. All right, so we're wrapping up this section. So here are some of the habits that you need to create when creating value science. Educate your team on the levels that we just discussed. So it does require, there's a whole bunch to unpack there. We just scraped the surface of values. But you can mine. When you get it down into values, it's amazing. Like what creates wisdom. Like wisdom is a very interesting one because you get into it. It's about encountering awe in some respects. That you become encountering with things that are bigger than you. That makes you wise. It's not just about knowledge. It's almost about knowing that there are things bigger than you, and then you can be more wise. Humility is not about making yourself small. It's about making everyone else big. I can see the greatness in each person around me. That doesn't diminish me. It makes everyone else big. So it's the exploration of each one of these things so you know what excellent is. You know how you want to live with much more detail and how you go about your day. Like to humble myself, I don't have to go, I'm just no good. I get to go, wow, you guys are amazing. And that changes my humility completely. I see the greatness in the people around me. So let's start with Viktor Frankl. This seems like a strange place for Viktor Frankl to discover where these things came about. So Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor, and he's the author of a lot of these thinking about these values. How did he discover this? Well, he had all of those sub-values. The creational values, he showed up at the concentration camp holding his life work, a manuscript, handwritten back then. You didn't have that. You couldn't store it in the cloud. Taken, tossed in the fire, life work, gone. Creational values, gone. You get to dig ditches. You're a PhD scientist digging ditches in bare feet, in the snow. Experiences, experiential values, home away from home? No. No food, bare feet, too cold, disease, lice, death, barbed wire, mistreatment. Experiential values, gone. What was left was the ultimate value that couldn't be taken from him. And this is what he saw. He said, "For the first time in my life, I saw the truth that is set in song by so many poets and proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers, that the truth, that love is the ultimate highest value to which man can aspire, and that I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart, that the salvation of man is through love and in love." Because that couldn't be taken from him or from others. He would watch others in this concentration camp who had that, and it could never be taken from them. An ultimate value that powered them through the darkest dark. He realized when everything else is taken away, valuing people can never be taken from you. And it's an energy that flowed from each one of those people in a special way. And here we'll close with this story about how values were embodied in an ER in Cooper Medical Center. Tragically, a 52-year-old man was brought into the ER one night, and he had a major aneurysm. And they did the scan on him, and there was nothing that the surgeons could do. It was going to be fatal, and he was going to die within a couple of hours. And his wife was there, and she was in tears, and she was calling her daughter on the phone, saying, "Honey, your dad's not going to make it. You're going to have to come here quick." And so soon after that, the daughter arrived by his bedside with her fiancé. They were due to get married in 2 weeks. And what she wanted above all else was for her father to give her away. And she was crying, and that's when the ER staff sprung into action, and because of their values, they said, we could do something about this. And they went into the fridge and they found an old pound cake and they made it into a wedding cake. They found some flowers that were in one part of the hospital and they brought them in. They found something blue and they gathered the staff together. And they didn't, like, who's going to perform this wedding? And one of the EMTs that came in, he says, I'm an ordained minister, I can do this. So they brought together the entire staff of the ER into the small room around the father. They brought in a sister from California over the phone, and one of the other nurses was playing wedding music on the phone. And they got to the point where the EMT was saying to her, who gives this woman to be with this man? As a dad with 2 daughters, having that privilege to do that is precious beyond words. And because of the values that they had in their heart of this is what's most important, that the last 2 hours of this man's life and his daughter's life, and they created in that one moment the creation of values so powerful that it moves us today of what they did with their values for their hearts. What did they create? They created joy in the midst of pain. An ER probably loses so many people, and they could have just said, there's nothing we can do, I'm sorry, and walked away. But they didn't walk away. Their values created something beautiful that they would remember for a lifetime. That daughter's last memory of her father was preciously held because of what those people did in their actions, out of their values, out of their hearts. And that's what you will take away for a lifetime. There's those moments that you create, that people walk away saying, being with you is special. Being with you changed my life. And that's what we can create for each other. Not just an organization, but we can create beautiful moments of great values for everyone that we touch. So thank you for your time. And I hope that we all go inspired to try to create these values for others in our lives. That we walk away from the art of BB culture, not just the techniques. But I hope you feel inspired that we could live a life and create this for each other and create a beautiful place for us all to live and work in, and for the communities that we serve. Thanks. So I hope we can inspire our teams when we go forward with some of these words and some of these actions. And I thank you for your time. Mm-hmm.